This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. The Prime Minister sends a cautionary message to Russia. Malaria deaths fall to 0, and over 1,000 Thais forced into labour are rescued. But first, more on our main story. Prime Minister Hun Sen has spoken on the escalating war within the Ukraine, as worldwide tensions mount after Russia invaded its neighbouring country with a ferocity that has surprised many. The PM expressed his desire for peace, saying, "In my personal opinion, the Russian army may not be able to overthrow the Ukrainians through the use of military force, while the Ukrainian military will not be able to crush the Russian military forces, and therefore neither can put an end to this war. The only way out is through peaceful negotiations."
Heavy fighting between Ukraine and Russia broke out earlier in the week, and in recent days Russian military forces have killed hundreds of Ukrainians. But despite taking control of some cities, how many days and how many troops will be needed to win the war? If it can even be won, considering an entire nation will take up arms against the aggressor. It will surely be a very protracted campaign. The PM went on to say, let them look at some countries like Iraq, Syria and Libya. Have those wars ended in peace? Russia could be embroiled in Ukraine for many long years. If Russia leaves troops on Ukrainian territory, it could be comparable to the experience of the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s and US and NATO troops in Afghanistan in the 21st century. The most important task ahead is to negotiate peacefully, in a mutually beneficial way, to end the bloody war and find true peace.
The Health Ministry made a huge announcement this week that Cambodia has not recorded any deaths by malaria since 2018. This is a staggering feat, especially when one keeps in mind in 2020 over 220 million cases worldwide were recorded, with over 500,000 deaths. The director of the National Centre of Malaria Control said this was largely due to more people following health measures to avoid getting bitten. They said there was 4,279 cases of malaria last year, which was a decrease of 54% from the year 2020. And there have been no fatalities since 2018, which is 3 years prior to the 0 death target of 2020.
He said the ministry works closely to educate people, especially those who venture into the forests to earn a livelihood, on ways to protect themselves from being bitten by mosquitoes. The ministry said that 95% of those that go into the forests now are sleeping under mosquito nets. He noted, to prevent malaria from spreading in a community, authorities are also regularly searching for those that have the symptoms, so that they can be treated. Health department officials continue spraying pesticides to destroy mosquito breeding grounds. Minister of Health Man Bun Heng said, to eradicate malaria, we have to review the progress of the national programs and share the project to reach the final goal of eradicating malaria by 2025. It is quite an incredible feat beating the threat of malaria, and it must surely be on par with beating polio.
The Foreign Affairs Ministry has helped bring about the rescue of more than 1,200 Thais who were lured into working illegally within Cambodia. Since last year, the Thai embassy in Phnom Penh has received messages from distressed Thais duped into working illegally for call centre gangs that are based in Cambodia. So far, 1,200 have been rescued and returned to Thailand. The majority are young people who, under the pressure of finding work amid a sluggish economy due to the pandemic, agreed to move to Cambodia to take up a position that looked to offer a good salary. It was only on their arrival they were to discover that not all was as it seemed.
The Thai embassy still receives messages alerting staff to other such cases. According to the victims, they come across job advertisements on social media that promise high wages. After applying for the positions, arrangements are made for them to cross illegally into Cambodia, where they are taken to their workplaces. In their new roles, many people were put to work as web page administrators and telephone operators who call people in Thailand with the sole purpose of scamming them to wire money into the gang's bank accounts. Some also work to convince people to join online gambling activities. If the workers failed to do their job satisfactorily, they would be traded like cattle to another criminal gang. If they were caught trying to flee, they would be threatened with violence and have to pay off their entire debt owed to the gang for bringing them to work in Cambodia. Many described the situation as pitiful and working in conditions that resemble slavery, long hours of work under oppressive regime for little money.
Cambodia ranked third in real income gains and export growth under the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a free trade agreement endorsed by the World Bank. RCEP covers approximately 30% of the world's population and accounts for 30% of global gross domestic product. It is a vast amount of trade and a vast amount of funds.
Starting January the 1st, 2022, RCEP is a mega trade agreement among 10 ASEAN members. In terms of export growth, the report said Cambodia was expected to experience an increase of 6.5%, with Vietnam at the highest growth at 11.5% and Japan at 8.9%. Cambodia Ministry of Commerce Under-Secretary of State and spokesman Pen Sovchet said RCEP is a victory of multilateralism and free trade and will become the core foundation for trade and investment in the region. It, with Cambodia's continually rising GDP that is outperforming many other countries percentage-wise, is an exceedingly positive sign for the kingdom's financial health.
If you've ever been in possession of $1 million in cash, you will know that that amount of money is really heavy and really smelly. But these issues are of no concern to one lucky chap who believed he had found $1 million note. He lives in Poi Phet City, and he thought his life had been completely transformed when he found a $1 million bill. But it was not to be.
His perceived wealth took a very serious downturn at 7:50 a.m. on February the 25th, when the working group of the National Police received information from a concerned citizen that a local man was in possession of what appeared to be a $1 million banknote. As to why a citizen should be concerned maybe adds a new layer to the tale, but it did not take long for police to intervene and raid the man's house in Poi Phet City. There, police found that Pun Sun Heng, a 31-year-old man, did in fact have the banknote. However, after a thorough inspection, sharp-eyed police immediately determined the note was a counterfeit. Police then confiscated the banknote and educated the owner on funny money. They advised if you ever find yourself in possession of a $1 million bill, the United States has never issued a $1 million bill. However, many businesses do print these notes as novelties. Oh well, maybe next time for Mr. Heng.
Here is the sports news, including how devastating the effects of the Ukraine conflict have been on football for Russia globally. FIFA has banned Russia from all international competitions, including qualifying games for the World Cup. In a joint statement, FIFA and UEFA announced that the ban will apply to the country's national teams, as well as any club teams competing in any FIFA or UEFA competitions. The decision comes after Poland, Sweden and the Czech Republic all pledged not to play Russia in their upcoming World Cup qualifying matches. Also, Chelsea have been affected by the continued invasion.
Owner Roman Abramovich said Saturday he was handing over the stewardship and care of the Premier League club to the trustees of its charitable foundation. It is understood that Abramovich took the decision in order to protect Chelsea from reputational damage as war rages in the Ukraine. The Chelsea manager admitted on Friday uncertainty over Abramovich's future. He said, "We should not pretend this is not an issue. The situation in general for me, for my staff and for the players is horrible." Earlier in the week, using parliamentary privilege, Liberal Democrat MP Leila Moran named Abramovich as one of the 35 key enablers to Russian leader Vladimir Putin. And she said he should be severely sanctioned.
Now a quick look at the Premier League table.
The top of the table remains unchanged. There were some interesting results. As expected, Southampton beat Norwich City, and they did that by 2-0. The most interesting game was Watford-Man U. Watford managed to hold Manchester United to a 0-0 draw at Old Trafford. My team, Crystal Palace, did something rather unusual. They scored a goal, and they did that at Burnley. Now, Burnley haven't really scored much since the fall of the Roman Empire, but they also broke their usual ways by scoring a goal themselves. So it ended up Crystal Palace 1, Burnley 1.
The weather this week is pretty constant. That is, the presence of potentially cloudy skies will be with us all week, and the temperature itself will stay in the mid-90s. The only real change is the potential for rain this coming Saturday. This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing me at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by downloading our app from your app store. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next Saturday for your weekly roundup.